G'day. I have a very interesting video for you today. Over the weekend of the 1st and 2nd of September, the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum in Cairns had its annual AusArmourfest Open Day. I went along on the Sunday and it was an excellent experience. Not only do they have an impressive amount of static displays, but they also have some running vehicles that you can pay to ride on. The displays feature US, Russian, British, German, Czech and some Australian vehicles, with a smattering of artillery, anti-tank guns, small arms, and a quite large SA-2 surface-to-air missile inside the large sheds. In total, they have over 100 large displays. I was very impressed with the sheer range of items, some original, others replicas. For the most part, they were from early World War II through to the Cold War. I'll now touch on some of the static displays. If you want to see some vehicles in motion, skip to around the 6-minute mark. I'll start with the Germans. Here is a Panzer 38T. Technically a Czech tank from before the war, Germany incorporated into their forces after taking over Czechoslovakia. Parked next to this was a Tiger I replica, with some tank crew and cosplay nearby. They asked me if I wanted my picture taken with the tank, but I already know what I look like, so I politely declined. Very nice of them to offer though. There was also a Stug parked behind the Tiger that I couldn't quite get a good picture of. In this same section of the shed was a Hummel self-propelled gun, some anti-tank guns, and a quad anti-aircraft gun. There are also some battle-damaged exhibits in the same area, like this destroyed Tiger turret and this drive sprocket with an 85mm hole in it, assumed to be the result of incoming fire from a T-34-85. Speaking of which, onto some Russian tanks, no collection of which is complete without some form of T-34. In this case, an aforementioned T-34-85. Unfortunately, I had to ration my camera's memory and missed out on several Russian tank destroyers, but I did get this rather large Pion 2S7 203mm SPG in shot, and this T-34-55. Their T-72 was outside doing laps. Next, some of the United States displays, starting with this M47 Patton. Designed with the experiences of World War II, but incorporating newer technology and design concepts. Note the hull-mounted machine gun, which is a throwback to the war. Later tanks did not incorporate this feature, preferring a front plate without a hole already in it. In the opposite end of the shed, there is an M3 Stuart light tank. Note the many machine guns, very American. Next to this was an M3 Grant and an M3 Lee, although I only managed to get a picture of the Grant. Not a particularly popular tank, it was more of a stopgap creation to get armor and guns into the war. And then of course we have the M4A1 Sherman. This one is called Allison. Easy to produce, easy to fix, and quite functional as an armored vehicle. I would consider the M4 Sherman and its many variants to be the quintessential US tank for World War II. Not content with letting the Russians have all the big guns, here is some US artillery. On the right is a 155mm Long Tom, in the middle a 203mm howitzer, and on the left another Russian artillery piece is snuck in, a 152mm howitzer. To finish off with an actual US machine, here is an M52 105mm howitzer self-propelled gun. Continuing with the Allies are the British. Near the main entrance was this chieftain. I couldn't quite get an uninterrupted angle from the front of this beast. I barely managed to get most of the thing into frame. Next up, a Churchill 7, which is one of my favourite tanks. I'm not sure why exactly, the armour probably. Such that it is, with a nice lack of any sloping on the front there. The gun isn't massive either, but I guess it did the job. For really big guns, we have this Churchill AVRE. Just look at the size of the barrel. If you're more of a high-velocity shells fan, here are two variants of the 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Segueing into the Australian displays, here we have a Matilda with a dozer blade on the front. Originally a British design, Australian experiences in the jungle had us add the dozer blade, making it our own. It's a very beefy looking little tank. Next up is a rather distinctive Australian designed and manufactured tank, the Sentinel Mark I. Its claim to fame was that it was the first tank to have its hull cast as a single piece of steel, quite impressive for Australian steelworks during World War II. Next to this was the Sentinel Mark IV, An upgrade on the Mark I, it was designed to take much larger cannons like the 25-pounder and later the 17-pounder. Due to supply issues with the 17-pounder, it was originally tested by mounting two 25-pounder howitzers in the turret to simulate the recoil, which I think you'll agree is just amazing. I would love to see an example of that here at the museum one day. Jumping forward a few decades, we have this M113 APC. Technically a US designed vehicle, the turret and camo make me comfortable with claiming it as Australian. These pictures probably don't even cover half of the larger displays at the museum. I left the descriptions pretty vague, so you get the chance to experience more of it for yourself. It's worth taking half a day to walk around the sheds and see everything they have to offer. Downstairs from the main display area is a small 50-meter shooting range, but this is shut during the AusArmourfest weekend. When it's open, you can have a practice with a 22 before having a go with the centerfire rifles they have available, bolt action only. If this is your thing, make sure that you meet the legal requirements listed on their website. In the same area is a collection of small arms from the major powers. This included pistols, rifles, submachine guns, machine guns, and light anti-armor weapons. Back upstairs, the tanks were available for rides and were being driven around a circuit in the outside area. It was early spring and the temperature was 30 degrees Celsius outside, which is about 86 degrees in slushy water to some dude's armpit units, or as people from the USA insist on calling it, Fahrenheit. Not overly uncomfortable, and the large fans kept the interior of the sheds pretty reasonable, but something you may want to consider if you visit in the middle of summer. I didn't manage to catch it on camera, but the museum surprised the audience with a flyover from a Spitfire. I suspect it was a 75% scale example, as it looked a bit small and the engine didn't have the very distinctive Merlin sound, but still very impressive for them to organise it for the crowd. You've probably noticed, but the video quality isn't the best. My apologies for that. I was working with the only reliable digital camera I had, which was from before GoPros were even a thing. Still, I managed to capture a reasonable amount of vehicles in action. The Leopard 1A5 and the T-72 were the crowd favourites, running almost constantly for the entire time I was there. I'm not sure what was up with the Centurion in the middle of the field. It wasn't giving rides, but it may have been a work in progress to get running for the museum. I'll be quiet for a bit now and let you enjoy watching and listening to the vehicles doing laps.
This vehicle, built on a truck chassis, was built for the Americans, principally for airfield defence in Australia during World War II. It was made by the Ford Motor Company, and only 40 were built. Just appearing from behind the tree. The S1 Scout car had 6mm armour, a main armament of a .50 Browning machine gun, and could carry extra machine guns if required. Powered by a Ford V8 95 horsepower motor. There it goes over the hill. The S1 Scout car was restored here at the Australian Armour.
AusArmourfest runs once a year, but the museum is open 7 days a week from 9:30 to 4:30. My thanks to the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum for running a very impressive facility and being able to keep so many vehicles in working order. They intend on significantly expanding the display areas later this year and are getting in several new displays, including a Cromwell and a Sherman Firefly, which I'm looking forward to. Check out their website, which I've included in the description, for more details and a more complete list of what they have on display. I'm already planning on going back next year and maybe having a ride on a tank or two. I hope you enjoyed this video, and check out the museum if you're in the area. Thank you for watching.